While The Witcher 3 made CD Projekt Red famous, Cyberpunk 2077 made them infamous. When this game first released, it was so buggy and unoptimized, even the next generation consoles did struggle with it at points. The team in Poland have spent the last 3 years working away on updates, additional content and DLC, and Cyberpunk 2077 today is a very different game compared to its initial release. This is my second time diving into Night City, the first time since the next generation version, since the bugs, since the DLC, since the very meaty 2.0 update that enhanced gameplay in many aspects. Not only am I surprised by how this runs on the Steam Deck, but I am also surprised by how easily I have been drawn back into this game on a second playthrough. Should you play Cyberpunk 2077 on Steam Deck? Yes, I really think you should. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, in these videos I spend about half the time talking about performance of a game on Steam Deck and half the time talking about how fun or not a game is to play in general. So stick around for a full analysis on whether Cyberpunk is worth picking up on the Steam Deck. In my last few videos I did have comments asking me which Steam Deck I used, so just to put it out there, all of my gameplay of Cyberpunk has been with an LCD Steam Deck. I sadly don't have an OLED model. I would love one, but I don't sadly. If you have one, then you may get a couple of extra frames than me, but I also think that the lighting of Night City might look even better on an OLED model, so I'm pretty jealous of anyone playing Cyberpunk on one of those. So onto the video proper. The very first thing that you're greeted by when you press play is a launcher. Now, often launchers can be a bit of a nightmare for Steam Deck users because they don't play nicely with gamepad controls. They might require you to log in, so you have to manually open the keyboard, or sometimes they just crash. You know, EA's launcher seems to crash a lot. So I would understand if you're a bit worried when I said that Cyberpunk has a launcher, but I'm really pleased to be able to say that the Cyberpunk launcher is so easy to use. All it requires is just one press of the A button to launch the game fully. You can log in if you want to, sometimes it does prompt you, and that's just if you want to enable cross progression, but you're not forced to at all, and the launcher hasn't crashed for me one single time, so that's a really good sign to start with. Once you're in game and you're checking out graphics settings, you'll see that the developers have actually included a Steam Deck preset, and on the whole, if you don't want to be messing around with settings too much, you just sort of want to pick up the game and go, then this will work for you pretty nicely. There was one setting that I changed right away, which was the resolution scaling tool. I actually switched it across to the Intel one rather than the default. I just heard that it runs better for Cyberpunk in particular. Apparently it can be a bit game specific, and for Cyberpunk this is the one that you want to go for. Everything else you can leave as default, and that's a mix of medium to high settings, and you'll get about 25 to 30 frames most of the time that you play. This preset is capped at 30, but you wouldn't see much over that anyway. Now, this doesn't mean that you'll always get 25 to 30 frames. There are definitely times when the power of the Steam Deck struggles a little bit to keep up. So for example, when you're speeding through the city in your favorite vehicle, you can lose a few frames. I guess that the game just has to load things in much faster than it normally would, so that kind of makes sense to me. And over time I ended up slowly adjusting one or two settings down a bit just to help smooth out that frame rate a little bit, and after that I really was very happy with how it runs. In about 20 hours of playing, there was only really one or two times when the frame rate got to a point that I really didn't like it. And the first one was when you're going through Johnny's memories and you hop on the turret in the helicopter. For some reason that really tanked the frames. And then the second was in Delamain's garage. Now I don't know if that's because of all the sparks, but man, it's really hard to walk through there. The frame rate on that just absolutely plummets, but you don't have to go in there too often, luckily. One final setting that I did change was the gamma, and I was quite surprised by this. Gamma's not something I've ever changed for a Steam Deck game before, but Cyberpunk just felt way too dark for me. Some of the gameplay footage that I've taken for this video was before I fixed the problem, so you might notice it. There might be some clips here where, especially at night, there are times when it just felt like you couldn't really see much of anything at all. So it might be worth checking this setting out and adjusting it to your taste if you do think the game is a bit too dark. Now, with these settings, I usually get somewhere between an hour and a quarter to an hour 45 of battery life, and it sort of depends on where you are and what you're doing in the moment. And so the lower end of this really is a little bit lower than I would normally like from a Steam Deck game. You know, an hour and a quarter, it's just something to bear in mind. And this was on the LCD Steam Deck, like I said, so if you've got an OLED, I would think you'll get a bit longer to play because the battery is a bit bigger in that. On the whole, it's not bothered me too much having that shorter battery life, but I know it can bother some people. And then similarly, something that doesn't bother me too much, but I know it can be a bit of a big deal, is the fan spinning. So the fan spins pretty much the whole time while Cyberpunk is running. It can get a little bit noisy while you're playing. In case you're still worried about bugs and glitches, that kind of thing left over from when Cyberpunk was first released, well, let me just say that I didn't notice any minor bugs or major bugs really. It seems like gone are the days of, NPCs falling through the floor or things failing to load incorrectly. Everything seems to be working as intended, and I haven't even crashed one time since I started playing on the Steam Deck. So it really does seem like basically everything has been cleaned up over the last few years. And you can definitely argue that this is how the game should have been when it's released, but anyone coming into it for the first time is going to have a smooth experience now. One final thing to mention when playing on the Steam Deck, and that is sleep mode. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I love sleep mode. It's one of my favorite things about the Steam Deck, being able to pause and quick resume PC games, but how useful it is can depend on what game it is that you're playing. It's really, really handy in Cyberpunk. First of all, the game doesn't need a constant internet connection, so when you resume, it really does just carry on from where you were. There's no reconnection needed or kicking you out to the main menu. There is a bit of a cherry on top for Cyberpunk though. The game does have a pretty good save and load system. Most of the time you can basically save and load exactly where you were. However, there were quite a few times when I would go to save, and because of something that was happening in the story or maybe something in the gameplay, I wasn't actually allowed to save at that moment. So in that case, being able to put it to sleep has been a real savior. I don't just have to switch it off and hope that when I resume it hasn't pushed me back too far. Sleep mode lets me start and stop exactly when I want. So by now, I'm hoping I've given you enough performance information that you can decide whether or not this game is playable on Steam Deck. For me, I definitely think that it is. You aren't really having to make half as many sacrifices to play this game in handheld as I thought you would need to. So now we move on to the second section of this video, which is this game actually any fun? And well guys, I think I might end up doing an entire second playthrough of Cyberpunk. Normally with these videos I play a game for around 10 hours while I figure out how well a game runs, if it's fun, whether it's worth it to play on Steam Deck. Given how massive Cyberpunk is, I didn't really think that would be long enough. I thought, give it a few more hours, maybe 15 would be a better amount. By that point I'd probably have gone around most places on the map, tried different combat styles and done a load of different mission types, and I thought it would give me a fairly good idea. Actually, at the time of recording, I'm on nearly 20 hours because I keep just getting sucked into this world. I'll say to myself, okay, you've got half an hour, just sit down, play some Cyberpunk, record some footage and take some notes for the video, and then the next time I check the clock, an hour has gone by. Existing in and exploring this game is just really immersive and fun. I don't remember the last time I noticed a game having sound effects for things like somebody shifting in a leather chair or the clink as a robotic hand lifts a beer bottle. There's just so much detail. Now, some things in Night City are only surface deep. Sure, you can't go into every single shop or building, for example, but a lot of things have improved since the last time that I played. So from time to time I've been attacked in the street because I've annoyed one of the gangs, and so they sort of come after me while I'm driving. The police system seems to make much more sense now, whether that's them trying to arrest you when you break the law, or if you want to take on bounties and trying to get rich by going after criminals. That's a lot of fun as well. And I even enjoyed just going around on the monorail from time to time. It was a bit of a unique experience, a bit novel, and I just loved that it was included.
Make room for fellow travelers. 1 seat per passenger, please.
Mostly though, I do like driving around, especially at night and especially on bikes. I don't often fast travel in this game just because I enjoy the way that driving feels. Almost all of the main characters in Cyberpunk 2077 are pretty fascinating. At one point you literally just have a conversation about a cat that the characters were spotted, and how because there aren't really cats around anymore, it could be something called a Bakaneko, which is this sort of evil spirit from Japanese folklore. You might think that's a weird conversation, but then it leads on to talking about how animals slowly disappeared from Night City one species at a time. So it sort of gives you a bit of background about something you might not have thought about in the game, and all of this is happening while you're actually scoping out a facility that you're going to hit in a little while. So it hadn't been put in there to advance the story, it didn't lead to some idea of how to sneak in, it was literally just put in there as something that two people might actually talk about. And I found almost all of the conversations in this game interesting. They tell you so much about the main characters and they make them feel so fleshed out and realistic.
Takamura? What the hell is he doing here?
He's got a few questions of his own for you.
You play nice, he might even save your ass. I'm almost done.
One of the biggest areas of improvement for me has been the RPG systems and mechanics. The skill trees now are much more interesting. You can really feel like you're building your character down the path that you intend to take them. Not only is there a section where you put points in as you please, but there's also a section that levels up depending on what actions you take in combat, and you also get a boost from doing that as well. So it's a really great way of building both what you want to do and what you're currently doing. I'm playing Cyberpunk quite stealthily. That is how I tend to find myself playing these games, although sometimes I do try and play in other ways. I just fall back into stealth. It's kind of like the Skyrim joke about everyone playing a stealth archer. I do just enjoy using silenced pistols in Cyberpunk though, although if things get really bad, then I do have my trusty SMG as backup. Although I did just recently take on a boss and realised that the SMGs share the same ammo as pistols, so that left me a bit stuck for a while. I ended up having to try and beat the boss with a sniper rifle, which felt a bit awkward. I'm also building a lot more into hacking than I did the last time that I played it through. I'm always on the lookout for interesting hacks to slot into my gameplay. One section of the game that I don't really remember messing around with too much last time was mods, but there seems to be much more choice now with how the skill trees affect it, and so I'm always looking forward to finding something cool. I've heard that there's a camouflage mod that basically turns you invisible that I think will go great with my build, so I'm on the lookout for that, and I'm currently using a mod for your legs to jump higher, so that sort of gives me more ways of getting around somewhere without being spotted. Finally, I'll just touch briefly on the story in case anyone watching this doesn't want to get spoiled, but essentially the story is great. It's really compelling and inventive. There's lots of different interesting quest lines that you're taking down with those characters that I mentioned. It probably helps that this originally comes from a tabletop RPG with a lot of lore already created, but the game does feel like it's set in a world with so much thought put in it, and it's just up there with some of my favorite gaming stories of all time.
And you? Who are you?
There is also a big DLC for this game called Phantom Liberty, which, by the way, I think that's such a cool name, Phantom Liberty. I haven't got this yet. I have heard that it's good, and after enjoying playing the base game so much on Steam Deck, I am tempted to pick it up. I can't tell you though if it runs any better or worse at this point, so if you want me to pick it up and make a video about it specifically, then let me know down in the comments and I will be sure to do that. Cyberpunk 2077 in 2024 is a really good game, and I'm really impressed by how good of an experience it is to play on the Steam Deck. Sure, if you have a really good PC, then you will notice the difference, but there aren't too many sacrifices to make in order to play this game handheld. People tend to consider the Steam Deck as powerful as the PS4, and I think compared to how badly this game originally ran on PS4, it's in such a good place now to play it on the Steam Deck. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and especially that you found it useful if you're considering picking up Cyberpunk on the Steam Deck. I'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts about this game. Are you going to pick it up now, or maybe if you're playing it already, how are you finding it on the Steam Deck? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.